Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're into the summer months around here. I mean, weather's warming up, baseball's heating up. Certainly was something seeing 150,000 people file into Camden Yards over the weekend. My vehicle spent every day downtown. My wife went to the farmer's market and hobbled around on Sunday in the city. But we just had a beautiful weekend moving around the city with Jamie Costello, whom I love. I saw so many people I couldn't even talk to that I wanted to talk to down at Little Havana. So cheers to Jamie. I just want to begin everything we do saying thank you to the Maryland Lottery for sending us off with the Gold Rush Sevens doublers. Last week we had them. We had them at Coco's. We had winners. We had a $20 winner at Coco's. Then on Friday we moved to Cooper's down in Fells Point. We watched the planes going overhead. Bill Cole and I were like ducking through the window. Ron Furman came down and we geezed about all the bands that we used to see, and Peter Buck and REM and all that cool stuff we saw last week. So big appreciation. This is a huge week. Some of the conversations you'll hear with Tom Pierce this week might it be about the Phillies or Phillies and Orioles lore, which I think even in the aftermath of 1983, a new little standard was set. So I'm wearing my Costas shirt. We will be in my homeland on Thursday. I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to have these Gold Rush 7 doublers to give away. Our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions put us out on the road as well with our clean water and our clean well water solutions. I talked to Doug last week. I'm looking forward to pimping him a little bit. He loves it. I'm wearing the Liberty Pure hat with Vinny Testaverde on Radio Row down in Miami 5 years ago in our 25th anniversary documentary. Jiffy Lube Multicare's got us out on the road as well. We're going to be in a place where I've had my car Jiffy Lube many, many times in Dundalk. We're going to be at Costas Inn on Thursday, and the Orioles play the Yankees. Hopefully they got the brooms out. I don't know. Time will tell. We're at the bottom of the rotation now after the Phillies this weekend. Luke is drinking his coffee. I hope he has some Royal Farms in there so it's tasty. I'm drinking mine out of the Cole Roofing mug. Bill Cole and I had such a laugh the other day just being down in Fells Point. And Luke, here's the bitch. The bitch is it was going to cost me $32 to park in a lot for 4 hours at lunchtime. I paid $6 up on Broadway in front of where I used to get my wrestling magazines at Whitey's newsstand at the corner of Eastern and Broadway. I had like a legendary weekend, but part of it was, dude, from the minute I sat down in Cooper's, there's Phillies fans everywhere. Every table, every shot you'll see in the videos and the pictures. I chatted with them all. My wife and I navigated. We effed up on Saturday going to Jamie's party. We arrived at our old home. Everybody knows where we lived, Harbor Court, right? We arrived there, I don't know, 4 minutes after the game ended. So like the flood of Phillies fans, the flood of people everywhere. The Orioles lost that one. So for me, this weekend was like everything I ever fought for with Free the Birds. When you're fighting for parking, and my wife and I got to think, oh my God, we just drove into 50,000 people leaving Camden Yards. What is this, amateur hour? We're trying to get around Key Highway. We had the time of our lives with Baltimore full this weekend.
It was an amazing weekend. I mean, it really was. And you just said, I mean, the only thing you could say is, well, you'd rather it not be quite as many Philadelphia fans, but hey, their money still works, right? Their money's still good.
And we beat their ass on the toll booth on the way home. They had to go home. They lost.
Correct. Go home and eat some cheesesteaks. But I mean, just an amazing weekend of baseball. Nestor, you know I'm not a hot take guy. You know I'm not a guy that's a prisoner of the moment. Typically, recency bias, which is such a big thing in sports, not to mention other walks of life. But I've been covering the Orioles since 2010, and this weekend's series was as enjoyable as anything that wasn't October. Wasn't a postseason game, but what an atmosphere. I mean, it really was.
Is this where you apologize to me and tell me I was wrong, that we could play big series in June? You and I were having these arguments about what constitutes, like, I think we can all now agree this is what baseball is. Like,
sure,
that it doesn't need to be sleepy, and the playoffs start. This is what Houston discovered in the last recent years. It's what Boston sort of knew all along and came to life and is lost all over again. But when these communities come to life, Philadelphia being activated as they are right now, where like Mets fans aren't as activated right now, right? So when you get activated to reach for your wallet and come out, this is the kind of experience you want to have. Good baseball, good matchups, great players, big moments. I mean, dude, like this is every single, as I've watched all this documentary crap about like this is what Free the Birds, this is what has been missing for a long, long time. And again, it's big series in June. I grew up on that. I grew up when the Tigers came in here and the Red Sox with Jim Rice came in here and the Yankees came in, and you felt, yeah, I was a kid, you felt big weekends and big series. I don't know that you've had an adulthood of that, Luke. I really don't. I mean, you do it with Ravens games. You feel a big Ravens game. We haven't had a whole lot of this, dude. So welcome to the party, even for guys that are 40 years old that have had a lifetime that haven't had a whole lot of this, man.
Yeah, I mean, there've been some of them, but certainly not many of them. And the point I made to you about the big series, that was more of a late April, early May thing. For me, and I've said this as someone who's going to be 41 this fall, Memorial Day has always been the time for me where it's like, all right, is a team real or not? Is this legit or not? We've seen teams start out well in April and even into May, and then they start to seek their level, of what they are. But when you're talking about going into the weekend with two of the three best teams in baseball, on the National League side, a team that was in the World Series 2 years ago, a team that was in the NLCS last October. And when you're talking about the Orioles, who were the number one seed in the AL last year and came into the weekend just behind the Yankees, as we've chronicled and we'll continue to talk about this week as the Orioles are going to the Bronx, it's legit, even for mid-June. My only point when I say that is if you get swept here, the season's not over. If you sweep that team or win the series, it doesn't mean you're made for October, but
But when
everything
the
you
game's tied 2-2 in the sixth inning,
it's
in these
huge.
kinds of
Yeah.
games, and with this kind of a crowd, in this kind of an environment, with these kinds of stakes, when you're chasing the Yankees or being chased by the Braves, whatever your flavor is, and fans have gotten together and put their jerseys on and filled up Fells Point, and planes are flying over top, and it's new for the Orioles fans, and it's fanatical for the Phillies fans, right? I mean, they're way into it when dogs are dressed as Chase Utley, like I saw last. I was in Philly last weekend, so I went to a Philly festival last weekend in Wayne, Pennsylvania, and I saw it up there that weekend where I was taking pictures of like fun things I'm going to share with you maybe even in this thing with Philadelphia, because it's this isn't a rivalry, but like I've got a lot of memories that I even shared at the front of Baltimore Positive from my Pentax camera of the Fanatic and the Bird in 1983. That if there's interleague play that matters, Orioles Phillies should pack them in as maybe one day Bud Selig, when he dreamed this up 30 years ago, to that the Brewers need to sell tickets, so let's move them to a different league and bring the Cubs in. I don't know, but like this is, we got to have some Hatfields and some McCoys, above and
Yeah.
beyond the Yankees and the Red Sox, right? And certainly don't have that with the Nationals ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a minute back during the Buck Showalter era, it kind of sort of felt that way with the Nationals, but it was very fleeting for both clubs at that point in time. But I
Dude, I'm
mean, it was
surprised
fun.
they didn't brawl Sunday when they came in on Cowser. And and I don't usually open the conversations with that Sutcliffe talk. But like, I mean, it could have gotten chippy on Sunday for sure, on Father's Day, no less.
It could have. I still, everything I watched, to me, other than when it came up and in on Gunnar Henderson in the seventh inning on Saturday, where, I mean, that was just scary more than anything else. I don't think the guy was deliberately throwing at his head. I think he was trying to come inside and then it went up the ladder more than he intended. But yeah,
The
I
Wheeler
was,
thing felt intentional. It felt purpose. It felt
I
like,
don't know about that.
okay.
I don't know.
I think he has more control than that. I just give him the benefit of the doubt.
Zach Wheeler got his butt kicked on Sunday. It wasn't prime Zach Wheeler. So, uh, look, as I was trying to think about this, and this was more of a Friday thing, as we were waiting out the rain delay going into the top of the 11th inning to try to conceptualize what this atmosphere was like, because it was a ton of Phillies fans. Sunday, a smaller percentage than the previous 2 days, but Friday, and Saturday, it felt very 50-50. And if you had told me it was even a hair in the direction of Philadelphia, I don't know if I would be able to argue otherwise with you. That's how many Philadelphia fans were there. What it felt like to me, and I can't say this with a full authoritative voice because I've never been to one of these, but it felt like a major, legitimate, competitive, energetic college bowl game where both schools have traveled extremely well to whatever neutral location it is, and everyone's going nuts over it. That's what it felt like on Friday and Saturday. Everything about the game, everything that happened, every outcome, every at bat, every pitch in certain instances,
Even the rain delay.
there was just a reaction. There was a
How about
strong
the
reaction.
Kimbrel thing? I mean,
Yeah.
you and I
That's
sat
funny.
here all week, and I had Tom Pearson from Classic 5, who's the Philadelphia Gus Kimbrel coming out of the bullpen and getting cheesesteaks.
I mean, it was amazing. It really, really was. I mean, the atmosphere was just, it was unlike anything I've really seen from the standpoint of just how back and forth it was.
But it takes Philadelphia fans to make that happen. That
Sure.
doesn't happen with San Diego and LA or
Well,
I'm telling you, man, dude, I try. Like maybe
Sure.
Houston and Texas could get together, but I mean, there's something about these Phillies fans running the streets here all weekend and planes flying and everybody scrambling to get to the game. And to your point, dude, the bowl games, I thought of it more like a World Cup game. Like, you know what I mean? Like I looked at it like that because it was raucous. Not even like a football game because they would divide the crowd in some way. And soccer, that I mean, where my people come from in Venezuela, in South America, they build the cages and say you're over there and you're over there, and we're not letting you're going to exit first. There's all of that goes on in a lot of places where they play soccer, but this was sort of mixed and match, and the red and orange on TV, I couldn't tell the difference, but everybody was seated together. So it's a little more communal, dude. And I saw some ladies that might have been from Cherry Hill getting exited from the stadium by some of Baltimore's finest in the late innings on Friday night. But it can only be possible with Philadelphia fans. Or New York, like
right.
It wouldn't be possible with Braves fans. You know what I mean? Like it couldn't have the same energy. It couldn't.
Well, I mean, you're just, the proximity is one thing. I think there were a couple other factors here that made this a perfect storm for what it was. Keep in mind, Philadelphia, the Phillies had not been in the Baltimore since I think it was 2018. So you're talking 6 years. The Phillies were still not very good at that point in the way that the Orioles were just entering their, the bottom had fallen out and they were horrendous, worse than they had ever been at the end of the Buck Duquette era. So 6 years ago, I mean, that's an eternity. So you've had the Phillies become what they've become over the last 3 years or so. The Orioles have become what they've become, but we know how the MLB schedule comes out in a random day in late July or August. I guarantee you Phillies fans looked at that point in time and they put in the back of their mind, oh, they're going to be in Baltimore in mid-June next season.
Father's Day, let's go down there.
Keep that in mind. So they didn't buy the tickets then, but that was on their calendar long term as far as whatever road trip they're going to take. And hey, it's
go to Baltimore, ring the bell.
Yeah. So when tickets went on sale in the off season, they scooped them up.
Dude, and tickets were $100 Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it because I mean, it was packed to the gills. I had a couple friends. I had a friend from the Philadelphia area who was rooting for the Orioles, mind you, because he's from this area originally, but he came down on Friday night, but came with some friends who were Philadelphia fans. So there was some of that, but the Phillies, Citizens Bank Park, that atmosphere. Right now, that's one of the toughest tickets in baseball. I mean, go look at what the Phillies tickets are on the secondary market on any given night.
They are a big brand.
It is. So if you're someone in the Philadelphia area, and let's say you're someone on a fairly limited fixed income that you only have so much money to spend for luxury items and leisure items, you look at a trip to Baltimore and say, you know what? We can make a weekend out of that and not spend a ton of money and have a great time. And we know it's a good ballpark. And hey, the Orioles were in the playoffs last year. So there was a lot of that going on.
Luke, I saw people in Fells Point, and I told my wife this. It reminded me of the folks that went on my trips all the time, but even like 15 years later. These are people in their 60s who still get around, Maybe they don't want to fly. Maybe they don't want to pay to fly. They can get in their car. They drive down. They can dump their car, check into a hotel, walk around. Look, everywhere I went, I mean, I was in Cooper's all day, but these Phillies fans were like, hey, I just saw, they were talking about Bond, that players walking the streets, that the tourism, they're staying at the Four Seasons. We just ran into player X. Aaron Nolan's walking down the street, and I heard all of this vibe and buzz. And like, if you watch the Bill Cole video, like from Friday, we can't stop smiling because he and I are the guys during the darkest days of the city where I'm planning a bandit mayoral run, where we're talking about nobody doing anything and the baseball team stinks. And I'm talking, 2018, 19, like what's going to bring people back to the city? People, I ain't going back to Baltimore. Jane Miller eats this up on Twitter, by the way. So I love me some Jane. I got to get her on the show. But when people come back to the city, she's like, I guess people are coming back to the city all of a sudden. Let's talk about them coming back to the city, because they were in the city and the city was vibrant and the kitchen was happening and the food was good and the traffic sucked. And, like that's where it is when things get, but my wife and I had to go down to Jamie's party and we're driving. And on the way down, I said to my wife, I'm like, oh my God, it's the bottom of the eighth inning. They just scored two more runs. Then they scored another run. And I'm like, the Phillies fans are going to be filing out. We're going to really have a hard time. There's only one way to get to Key Highway from north. It's down Light Street. There's no other way to get there. Martin Luther King didn't seem like a good idea at all to go on the west side of the
Mm-hmm.
stadium and have to navigate back. And she's like, why are you freaking out? And I'm like, I was down here yesterday. There's Fleetwood. Like, it's going to be and we got through pretty well, actually. Like, all things considered, it was a very, very peaceful trip through the city, but we screwed up. And my wife was in disbelief that this many people would be here because we lived downtown for 19 years.
Right.
And I used to warn her about this. We first got married, like in 03, 04, 05. Like, hey, we got to plan the marathon. You got to plan when streets are shut. You got to plan when the Orioles are going to play and let in and let out, because you don't want to get stuck in that, because you can just get trapped. Like football games, after games. Uh, Like, these are the problems Baltimore Positive wants to have, which are lots and lots of people coming back to our city and hopefully really having a good experience, right? Like, it was a delightful weekend. I think all the way, weather notwithstanding the rainstorm on Friday night. But I mean, people really got treated. They would do it all over again next weekend if they could. And I think there's a feeling for everybody. And I even kidded with you before we even began. I'm like, yeah, we're going through the schedule. October, Wheeler Burns game 1, October 20. Like, there is a little feeling that that's possible.
Sure. I mean, no question about it. I mean, this was a really entertaining series. I mean, Friday and Saturday especially were great back and forth ball games. I mean, obviously the Orioles hit 4 home runs off Zach Wheeler on Sunday, so it wasn't quite as tight of a game. But just, I mean, these are two super heavyweights. When we were previewing this series, a lot of this wasn't just that the Orioles have been what they've been for most of the history of Camden Yards. This is still unique in the sense of there are a good series, there are a great series, and then there are two super heavyweights going at it. Same thing happened at Yankee Stadium the previous weekend when the Dodgers and Yankees convened and were playing each other. I mean, this was every bit of that in terms of the quality of these baseball teams. I mean, the Phillies are the class of the NL. The Orioles, yeah, they're technically chasing the Yankees, but there's no. I was actually talking about this with an Orioles fan late last week. Someone I just interact with on some social media. Orioles fans at this point in time, not talking about ownership, Masson, business side, any of that. Just talking about the team on the field right now. There is no inferiority complex that needs to be had right now. This team is as good as anyone, and there's no reason to fear the Phillies or fear the Yankees. Those teams are looking at the Orioles and saying, wow, we got to play the Orioles.
Well,
I mean,
it's
that's,
not only that, the backup plan of the trade, the fact that they have the arsenal to be
yeah,
in play for anything and anybody, even the money side. Now, Mr. Moneybags throwing out hats all
sure.
weekend. And there's going to come a point where, they're going to have to give up Norbies and give up Kerstats and,
Well, they've already done it for Corbin Burns. I mean, have you seen what Joey Ortiz is doing for the Brewers? Go Google what his numbers are. I mean, they were saying over the weekend that, hey, the Orioles may have made a mistake. Milwaukee was saying they may have made a mistake giving up Joey Ortiz for Burns. I think the Orioles are just fine with where Corbin Burns has been up with his latest quality start. But yeah, and we'll get into it. I'm guessing we'll have a more extensive discussion. The Kyle Bradish news. Yeah, I mean,
God, we
they're
haven't even brought that up, right?
they're
Like,
right, and that was another part of Friday night was kind of deflating, and they lose. It's the weird rain delay after Mullins had just gotten his hand in to tie the game in the last of the 10th, and they were feeling good. The heavens opened up and it started pouring. I mean, Nestor, it was like something out of a movie. It just started pouring. I knew rain was coming, but this wasn't like, oh, it misted for 10, 15 minutes and then picked up. It was drizzled for like 30 seconds and then just
it
rain
was a
just came
power
crashing
cell,
down.
dude. I saw it crashing in, and I'm like,
Yeah.
are they going to finish this? Or that then the Kimbrel, like all of that was going on while like the Wizard of Oz was happening in Frederick, like literally.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, so it was deflating. And Brandon Hyde reveals after the game, as we're asking, because Bradish was lifted after not that many pitches, so it was kind of like, hey, what's going on with him? And he acknowledged that Bradish's elbow was bothering him, so that's why he came out after only 5 innings. And obviously, it's listed as a sprained UCL. I don't need to tell you where this very much feels like it's heading at this point. I mean, even if it's not Tommy John now, it feels more and more inevitable. And certainly that you can't expect Kyle Bradish to be pitching again for the Orioles this year. If he does, great. We'll cross that bridge when we get to that. But they bounce back. Grayson Rodriguez gives him what they gave, or gives them what he did on Saturday, which was a big boy bulldog start. He pitched extremely well. And that was after it was a little shaky the first inning or two. But he was terrific. The bullpen was tired on Saturday. He gives them 7 innings. I mean, that was a reminder right there of, all right, they're going to have to figure out the rest of the rotation. And yeah, they probably have to go out and at least get a starter that can give them innings, even if it's not your definitive game 3 starter in a postseason series. But when you still have Corbin Burns and you have the version of Grayson Rodriguez that we saw on Saturday, they're still going to have a chance. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, yes, got to figure out who's going to slot in and what does Cade Povich look like against the Yankees, and Dean Kramer's starting a rehab assignment and all that. I mean, there are questions there. We can't hide from that. But when you have Corbin Burns and Grayson Rodriguez as your 1-2, and pray, knock on wood, cross your fingers, cross your toes, all of that. I mean, the same thing that any team does about their best pitchers, that they stay healthy and they're fine. But if you have those two, we were reminded on Saturday and Sunday that it stinks losing Kyle Bradish. It really stinks because that guy is such a talented arm. But season's not over. And this is still a heck of a baseball team. And, Brandon Hyde spent a lot of time Friday. I mean, there were so many questions before the game about the series and how big this was. And, he really tried to downplay it in the way that any manager is going to in mid-June and say, look, our guys aren't viewing it through that lens about thinking about the playoffs or that this is a really big series or anything like that. It's the next set of 3 games that we're playing. But he noted on Sunday afternoon, after they had finished up the 8-3 victory, after the 4 home runs off Zach Wheeler, gave easily his worst start of the year. He acknowledged that Friday night was tough. That was a deflating loss. That was a tough loss in 11 innings, and the news about Bradish. But he made note of, really says something about the makeup of this clubhouse, that they came to work on Saturday, and he said you would have never known that they lost the night before. You would have never known that, about the disappointment surrounding Bradish. And they're absolutely disappointed. They're devastated for the guy because of all the work he put in and just how well he had pitched since coming back overall. But they bounce back. They get a great start from Grayson Rodriguez. Anthony Santander with a huge game on Saturday. And then Corbin Burns comes out and does what Corbin Burns does, which is give you a quality start, a high quality start, and you just pound the baseball, against one of the best pitchers in the National League. So a great weekend on the field, a great weekend off the field. To your point, the fighter jet flying in the late innings on Sunday was just amazing. I mean, I'm sure a few players here and there probably didn't love it, but Colton Cowser said he'd never felt more American playing baseball than the fighter jet flying over Camden Yards in the seventh, eighth, and ninth inning. And, there was a USA chant at one point. Phillies and Orioles fans chanting that, which I thought was pretty cool. But special weekend. And as I said, going in doesn't make or break you. The fact that they took 2 out of 3 here doesn't guarantee the Orioles are making a deep October run. In the same way, if they had lost 2 out of 3 or been swept, the season wouldn't have been over. But for what it was, which was a fun barometer, a fun measuring stick, Orioles have nothing to be scared about facing anyone. I mean, they really don't. They're that good. They're that talented. To your point, they have a farm system and resources available to them to go out and make some moves. Don't do it just for the sake of doing it, but make the right move if it presents itself. But in the meantime, hey, they took 2 out of 3. And by the way, Boston Red Sox take a couple from the Yankees over the weekend and feeling pretty good about that. If you're an Orioles fan, as they finally have an off day and they head to the Bronx for 3. So, I mean, just a really special weekend. And to piggyback off of what you said, did not see too much. And believe me, if it's out there, it shows up on social media. Did not see too much as far as any issues. Like, didn't see a ton of fights in the ballpark or anything like that. Seems like for the most part, people had fun venturing
Woman
downtown.
I saw getting thrown out was like a 55-year-old woman who was in Phillies gear, who was being mouthy, and
yeah, I mean,
security came. Like
you're always going to
was
have a little
just
bit of that at
typical.
least.
Well,
Yeah.
dude, I've had my wife called. Begins with
Yeah.
a W and ends with an
Right.
E, and it's 5 letters in the upper deck in Philadelphia for 4 quarters, and like it's the folks that came down again. These are baseball fans. They're old and white essentially, and have a lot of income, and they come down here and they don't want to get in fights. It's not a football crowd. It's not a tailgating crowd. It's not it's not that. It's their parents.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was.
So I would just say from what I saw in the city, and I saw a lot because I was around all weekend. I saw droves of Phillies fans coming out. It looked to me like a lot of people coming down here and testing and taxing all that's good about Baltimore and filling up Amici's and filling up Cooper's. And it was Pride weekend. My wife and I drove right into Pride on the way out trying to get a taco at Clavel on late night on Saturday night, and they were busting that, but there were people everywhere there. I mean, the city would. There was Pride, there was Fleet Weekend, and there was 150,000 baseball fans piling in and out of Camden Yards and trafficking through all parts of the city in every way. I mean, I'm sure there were Phillies fans in hotels in Towson and White Marsh. I mean, you had to stay somewhere. So that's a beautiful thing for our town. And we talk about Preakness. We talk about, festivals we could have, or city fairs we could have, or an AFC championship game, or getting the All-Star game. This is what an All-Star game would feel. All-Star game might not even feel this good as this weekend did.
Well, I mean, I just think the proximity. I think because the Orioles and the Phillies are in opposite leagues, obviously 1983, we
Scarcity,
talked about that.
right? Scarcity.
But, right. But
yeah.
but I also think, I mean, I'm a perfect example of this, Nestor, as someone who was born in Baltimore, has lived within 40 minutes of Baltimore my entire life. I grew up, the Phillies were my National League team, because of my grandfather who, rooted for the Phillies. And when the Orioles, Browns came to Baltimore in 1954.
There are published pictures of me in Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah,
I had a Phillies hat. I had a huge fascination with the Phillies.
Yeah, so you have some of that. So it's not necessarily that all these people are wearing Orioles hats and Phillies t-shirts or vice versa. It's not like that, but there is a sense of, I think there's an appreciation of not everyone. And look, there are plenty of people who don't like Philly, and that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and tell anyone who to root for or not, but I think there are plenty of people in that crowd who are rooting for the Orioles, but when the Phillies aren't playing the Orioles, they like to see them do well. Myself included. I've talked about that a lot.
My dad would never root for the Mets. I promise you that.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I have friends who are Philadelphia sports fans, lifelong Philadelphia sports fans, who have said to me over the years that they like to see the Ravens and the Orioles do well as long as they're not going up against Philadelphia. So you had some of that. I mean, it was a great weekend. Lots of people, lots of money being spent downtown, which is always a great thing for the local economy and all the businesses and restaurants and bars and all that. It was just, to your point, it was really a weekend where I think Baltimore people could really feel good. And yeah, ideally it'd be 44,000 Orioles fans, and there's no red or none of the light blue or anything like that in the crowd. But hey, their money still, you can still take their money. And if anything, hopefully that this weekend, from that standpoint, from a big picture standpoint, is something that can galvanize Orioles fans to say, hey, the Phillies coming to town, 2 years from now, better buy those tickets early, or Philadelphia fans are going to do the same thing. So, we talked about this years ago with the Steelers coming in for Ravens games at Memorial Stadium. We talked about this, my goodness, so much in the 90s, even before the bottom fell out on the early stages of the Peter Angelos era. Yankees and Red Sox fans coming in. I mean, we talked about that. This is nothing new in that sense, but I do think there was a little bit of a perfect storm in the sense that Phillies hadn't been in here in several years. It's a tough ticket in Philly right now to go there. You're spending a lot of money. I mean, again, look at the
Well,
attendance
that's
they
why the
have
Red
on a
Sox
nightly
fans
basis.
came here years ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there's always some of that. And look, anytime you're talking about that kind of proximity, just a couple hours away, you're going to have some opposing fans in here. So, but it was a lot of fun. You said it, probably a soccer match, World Cup or something like that was probably a better comp than even a bowl game, because most of those bowl games
Give
no
me
one
the
cares
numbers
about.
you had. You said something in the beginning of the segment. You said Friday it was Saturday it was and Sunday. Saturday I ran into someone whose opinion I respect, who said it probably was 50-50 on Saturday.
Yeah,
That's what somebody said to me.
I think Friday and Saturday were very 50-50. In fact, if you had told me Friday night it was 52-48 for Philadelphia even, I probably would believe you. Sunday was still a lot of Phillies fans, but not quite as dramatic. I think Orioles fans probably bought that up knowing, hey, not just the Phillies and a good matchup, but it's Father's Day. So I think when tickets went on sale or people did, 12 game packages, whatever package, if you're a partial season plan, Father's Day is obviously an attractive day. So I think percentage was probably, I'd say 60-40, or maybe somewhere around there for Orioles in ahead of Phillies
Good.
fans. But Friday, Saturday, I mean, it really was remarkable. Anything that happened, there were even a couple other reporters, and at one point I'd gone to the restroom and I came back and I hear a roar, and it's like, okay, I have no idea what happened. Was it something for the Orioles or the Phillies? So it was very unique in that way. I mean, it was just a really fun series. And again, it's easier to talk about it through the lens of when it's a series win for the Orioles rather than a series loss. And
Yeah, we'll get to the Bradish bad news in the next
yeah,
segment. But
but just a great weekend for Baltimore. And like I said, it kind of capped off with the fighter jets in the late innings or the fighter jet flying around on Sunday, which was unique. I mean, that was fun. I mean, it really was. And you could tell that some of the players were a little disturbed, but Colton Cowser and even Brandon Hyde said it too. He's like, it's a little distracting, but he also said, I don't care. It was awesome. He embraced it. So I didn't even mention we even got an
They
old.
happened at Shea Stadium for 50 years, man.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. But I didn't even mention through all the fun of the weekend, we even got an old school manager umpire argument on Sunday with Rob Thompson getting run. I mean, that was Earl Weaver, Bobby Cox, Lou Piniella-esque. I mean, that was
There's a lot of salt, a lot of vinegar there.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, great weekend. Great series win for the Orioles. Great to get an off day. Only off day they get in the month of June before, hey, it's go time again. No rest for the weary. Head to the Bronx and see how you do against the Yankees, which you're going to face Nestor Cortez. You're going to face Luis Heel, their sensation on Thursday in the finale. And
I just love to hear Jim Palmer say Nestor all night. I love to hear that.
Yeah, and by the way, that Wednesday TBA, that could be Garrett Cole. It could be, from what I understand. I don't know for sure, but that's been the speculation. So
you and I should have gone to New York if your sister wasn't making babies and I didn't have work to do. I mean, big series in the Bronx, summer nights. Come on, Lucas. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I still might call you tomorrow morning. I don't know. We might, so.
It'll be a big series. I mean, no doubt about it. But also, they they gained a little bit of ground over the weekend, and just hold your own here. Hold your own. So great weekend. Lots of great baseball. Amazing atmosphere. I mean, as enjoyable of an atmosphere in a regular season game as I can remember. Talking media or any game that I've gone to as a fan in my 40 years here on Earth. So just a lot of fun and a good way for it to end, considering it was dicey for the Orioles on Friday night, and obviously we'll get into the Bradish news in another conversation.
We've had enough of Cal Ripken 21-31s and Delman Young moments and Eddie Murray 500th home runs at 2 o'clock in the morning that nobody witnessed and Alan walked out on. And he likes to tell that story as well. By the way, Alan joined us last week. We had such a great time. Alan and Max did this whole movie thing and symphony thing and Love of Oriole baseball thing from Coco. So all that's coming your way. Ron Furman and I geezing about rock and roll. I had Mark Bryan from Hootie and the Blowfish on last week. I don't think we ran it much. Thomas Dolby, his band's going out this week on the road. So we got a lot of things going on. So you're going to hear from all of that. And we have Oriole baseball this week up in the Bronx. Luke and I will be convening on Thursday at Costas doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I have fresh Gold Rush 7 doublers. We had a $20 winner over Coco's the other day. We also had a winner at Cooper's down. It was a Phillies fan, but he only won $2 and made sure it wasn't, when John Martin rubbed the tickets, it wasn't for that much luck for the Phillies fans. But we are having a good time giving these out. Come on out to Costas on Thursday. My guest at Costas on Thursday, I just want to get this straight. The great Chris Emery will be joining us on Thursday, as will Jessica Vallis, who has really redone our whole website at BaltimorePositive.com. So if you've seen that, she and I are going to have fun with fonts, if there is such a thing, before the week is over. All of that will be coming together over at Costas. Also, Pete Caringi has threatened to come out on Thursday, and Johnny O, future Congressman Johnny O. He didn't like when I called him Congressman the other night at Jamie Costello's party, but he'll be out at some point on the political trail. Also heard from Angela Alsobrooks' folks and Larry Hogan's folks. And I had Damien O'Doherty on at Coco's, who made some pronouncement about the senatorial race and about the Maryland election. So we're doing a lot of things. All brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions. Clean water, clean well water, keeping my water safe and clean, and doing plumbing and doing all sorts of cool stuff. I'll be talking to Doug about that, because I know this. Everybody needs a plumber. Everybody needs fresh water. We've talked a lot about that. Jiffy Lube Multi-Care also keeping our car out on the road, where anytime I go to Philadelphia now, I can break out the white paneled Oriole hat. Luke, I shared a photo of me and my dad on Father's Day. And after I shared it, I went up on LinkedIn and I looked and I realized I'm wearing blue Colts pants with white stripes. I remember the sweatpants. I only wore sweatpants in 1979, 80, 81. 82, I got to high school. I got GQ'd out with all my boys. We went over to Boogie Wineglass's place over at the mall, merry-go-round, and I spent a lot on skinny ties because I wanted to look like Thomas Dolby. I should have told him that. That would have been good. And then I realized underneath my elbow, my dad's got like a pendulous belly, and he looks like Archie Bunker, and he's sitting in an Archie Bunker chair, and he's reading the News American, 1982, 81, 82, maybe 82, 83, somewhere in there. And I look under my elbow, and if you look at the picture, anybody goes out on social and sees it, you can see the orange cap, the white panel bird. You can see my arm was on an Oriole hat. And so Oriole hat, Colt pants, Father's Day. That's what it's all about. So hope everybody had a great Father's Day, enjoyed their time with family, or at least fond memories. That's all I got at this point, other than my son, is fond memories of my dad, and watching like all of you have a good time with your dad, or tell good stories about your dad, or welcome new nieces and nephews into the world on Father's Day weekend. We're going to talk pitching. We're going to talk Bradish. We're going to talk assets and offense. We're going to talk about Aaron Judge hit one to the moon on Sunday night. My wife and I sat here and watched Sunday night baseball. We watched the Red Sox. She didn't like that part. And the Yankees, and I thought that was me doing some scouting work on Aaron Judge and Soto. I scouted them pretty good back in April when I harangued them and harassed them. It'd be a little more fun watching Jim Palmer say Nestor on Masson. I am Nestor. He is Luke. We're back for more. We're doing a lot of baseball here this week, and really a lot of cool stuff that you might have missed last week that you can find at BaltimorePositive.com. So stick around.